And we are back once again here on Yankees Hot Stove. And you know what? We might as well just make this a four-headed yes monster, as the three of us in studio are joined by Michael Cano in his studio. And, Michael, we already mentioned the fact that the names out there, Andrew Miller, Brett Gardner, tied together with potential trades. But when the dust settles after the offseason, do you think that the Yankees will have made a big trade or move involving big names?
Well, I think they're going to make a trade. Whether or not it's going to be a gigantic move, I'm not quite sure. I'm sure they'll aim high. But remember, a lot of the moves that Brian Cashman made last year didn't seem like they were going to be that big, and they turned out big. Nathan Eovaldi, I thought, was a tremendous asset for the Yankees before he got hurt in September, and we know the story of Didi Gregorius. So some of them could seem like middle-range moves, but they could have high-range effect on the team. So I think they'll aim high. They'll probably try to get a big hitter or something like that. Another big starting pitcher would probably be the first choice. But if they don't get the big name, they might get somebody that could just slide in and do a nice job.
You know, Michael, Bob mentioned Brett Gardner, and I want to get your thoughts on him. Do you think that the Yankees think maybe he's a diminished player with the second halves the last two seasons? And maybe what do you think the other 29 clubs think of him on the trade market?
Well, I think there's some value to him, John, because of the fact his salary is not exorbitant. It's hard not to ignore what he's done the last two second halves. Now, the Yankees are saying that there was an injury last year that slowed him down, but there really was no excuse the previous season. I think that he plays the game really hard. He puts a lot of wear and tear on the body, and he's not the biggest guy in the world. For the Yankees to even consider trading him, guys, I think you all know this. Brian Cashman and the Yankee front office love Brett Gardner. So if they're thinking of dealing him, and if they do deal him, they must think that there's something that's changed. Because remember, they gave him a contract extension when they didn't have to. They gave him the financial stability when they didn't have to. And now if he is dealt, something has changed in their assessment, because they have long been gigantic fans of his talent.
Michael, I'm in agreement with you that I think that Cashman and the front office are going to add a starter. But let's act as if they don't. They go into spring training with the rotation they have now. What do you think of that rotation?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of question marks. What exactly was wrong with Eovaldi last year that shut him down in September? That was a big loss for them in any chance they had to win the American League East. What's CeCe going to be? Obviously, you hope and pray that he came out of rehab okay. Physically, is the knee now settled because of the fact that he had the knee brace? He seemed like a different pitcher after that. Tanaka, he had minor surgery. How's he going to come back? Michael Pineda was not the same pitcher that he was in the first half of the season. Ivan Nova really never reached the heights that he had before the Tommy John surgery. And now Luis Severino is just a kid, and he's going to have a really, really big load to carry on this starting rotation. So, it has the possibility to be very, very good. Has the possibility to be a strength on the team. Also has the possibility to be a huge bust if some of those question marks come back in the negative.
And, Michael, having said that, with those question marks in the starting rotation, doesn't that then make a potential trade of an Andrew Miller? It kind of flies in the face of that maybe they should be trying to fortify their bullpen even more if those pitchers can only give them 5 or 6 innings.
Brian has been very, very sly about saying that he would listen on anybody. I've kind of been surprised when I hear about Andrew Miller. I know there's a market out there for relievers, and this guy's the American League Relief Pitcher of the Year, coming off a great season, 36 out of 38 as a closer, a 2.04 ERA. He did everything you would want him to do, and he only makes $9 million a year, and he's got 3 more years left on his contract. I'd be really surprised if they made the move. I'm sure there's value out there, and they could get a starting pitcher or a couple of young starting pitchers back in return. But who's going to fill Andrew Miller's role? That's my question right there. Is it going to be Dellin Betances, who's thrown more pitches than any pitcher in the last 2 years? That's a little bit of a concern because he was not the same pitcher in the second half of last year as he was in the first half. Do they think that he could be the closer? Or will they go out and get another closer if they trade Andrew Miller? Again, I look at the Miller possibility being traded, guys. If he gets traded, maybe they know something that we don't know. Maybe they're looking at him differently. Maybe they're saying, let's trade Andrew before a possible breakdown. Not quite sure, because he was so great for them. He's probably thinking right now, I should have demanded a no-trade clause, because there's a rumor out there about possibly Houston being interested. Well, Houston offered him $11 million a year. They offered him a $44 million 4-year deal, and he turned it down in a state without state tax to go to the Yankees at 4 years at 36, and he could be traded there and now making $2 million less a year because he didn't have a no-trade clause.
Right, it's one of the questions that will follow throughout the offseason. You've mentioned question marks, too, Michael. You go back to last spring training, I think we could fairly say both Alex Rodriguez, Mark Teixeira were question marks. They both had terrific seasons. But now we go to next spring training. What do you think Teixeira and A-Rod can give the Yankees?
Well, I think Mark Teixeira answered the questions. He's got to heal a broken bone in his leg, and I think that obviously that will be healed by spring training. The questions that Alex has to answer, can you play him 151 games? Because if you watch the Yankees every single day like we all did, there was a decided drop-off in Alex's production in September. I think he was exhausted. Now he's a year older. I think in order for Alex to be as good as he could be for the Yankees and be the force that he has to be in the middle of the lineup, they've got to keep him, I would think, to 130, 135 games. Because if you push him again another year older, you got to hope that he doesn't break down, and you hope that he doesn't lose the bat speed. Because no matter what the excuse was, he looked really, really tired in the month of September. They need him strong down the stretch. Remember, he's now become a very important part of this lineup. He's the number 3 hitter. You can't have the number 3 hitter hitting 200 with no power in the month of September. They've got to lessen the load on Alex.
Michael, quick final thought before we let you go. We talked about that Cano headline about being unhappy in Seattle. On your radio show, did that get a lot of play, and what were the thought processes?
Well, I brought it up last week before it even became a story that the Yankees should look into it, because a friend of Cano's told a friend of mine that he's not happy in Seattle at all. He's miserable there. Now, he'd never admit it publicly. Why would he? But in order for the Yankees to even think about Cano, so much of the salary would have to be eaten by Seattle. And why would they do that for their number 3 hitter? I just don't think it's a deal that would happen. But there's stories out today that he wants to get back to New York. Well, the union would never allow him to lessen his deal, as we found out when Alex wasn't allowed to lessen his deal to go to the Red Sox from the Rangers. So if Seattle's willing to pick up half of that salary and eat up the 3 years that the Yankees didn't want to give Robbie, I guess they could talk. It's intriguing because second base is still open for the Yankees, but there's so many moving parts on this, I can't really see it happening, although it does make some sense because I think Robbie would be rejuvenated if he returned to the Bronx and a stadium that really played to his strengths.
Makes for interesting hot stove conversation. Michael, our viewers, as always, can see you on your radio show weekdays on Yes at 3 o'clock. Happy Thanksgiving to you and the family.
Thanks a lot, guys. Same to everybody out there.